So we have bare minimum website running on Flask, consists of a page and an image. Let's go ahead and define a route. So what I want to do basically is I want to support all the functionality that I have in my course instructors UI. And if you look at that, so what I have is print a list of all the instructor lists, print an instructor list, including all the instructors in the list, add an instructor list, create a new instructor and add them to the list, and so on. So you should all be familiar with this from the previous labs. And I'm going to implement a web interface for doing each of those things. And I'm going to start with reading the data, which is going to look just like reading the data in my non-web version. So the console-based version, it's calling course instructors UI.read course lists. And I'm going to do the same thing here in my web version before I start listening for connections. And then name of the class is a little different, so let me correct that. But it's basically going to have under course lists and all instructors. So that should start up okay. And then it's going to call this course instructors web UI read course lists, which was just calling read course lists from the database. So I could copy that, but I'm just going to go ahead and declare a static method called read course lists. And it's going to return, actually, I think I was calling that in instructor list read course lists. Yeah. So that's what I'm going to call instructor list read course lists. And then I need to import that. So from instructor list, import instructor list. So that's going to initialize my data by reading it out of the database and then serve it. And then I'm going to define a path which shows a list of all of my instructor lists. And so this is going to have a fair number of moving parts, but we're going to walk through each part one at a time. So since this is going to be running as a method on an object, and it's going to be accessing this app property of the class, I'm going to make this a static method. And then it's going to have under app route. And then I specify the path that my URL will have to this document. And that's just a piece of text. So for this one, I'm going to name it print instructor lists. That's going to be the name of the command it executes. And this is also in the jargon, if you read the documentation from Flask, it refers to this thing as an endpoint. And it's a symbolic name that you can use to refer to the path. And then after this thing is actually going to be an annotation. So @ under app.route print instructor list is an annotation for this function, which I'm also going to call print instructor lists. I could call it anything, but I'm going to use the same name as I used in my path to keep me from getting confused. And then it's going to do some stuff and then return a string. So to keep this simple, I'm going to start by returning the string list of instructor lists goes here, and I'm just returning HTML. So when I run the code, what it's going to do is, let me fix all my PEP8 warnings. I think this line is too long. Yeah. So let's go ahead and break that line there. And then this should have another blank line. Okay. Method run may be static. I'm okay with that right now. So let's go ahead and rerun this. Oh, by the way, I should mention, so like one of the options to this run method is debug. And if you set debug equal to true, and then you edit and save any changes to any of your project files, it will automatically update the web server to use the latest version. And depending on what you're using to develop your files, that could be a good thing. But PyCharm doesn't really work very well with debug option, because PyCharm is set up out of the box to automatically save any changes you make whenever you make them. And so lots of changes that you make when you're doing development will leave your files in a state that will cause the web server to crash when it tries to load them. And if it crashes, then that sort of defeats the whole purpose of having that debug property set. So I found I haven't had really good luck on setting debug to be true when I'm doing web server development in PyCharm. So I just go ahead and hit the rerun button anytime I want to make changes and restart the web server. And that seems to work perfectly fine for me. So anyways, back to my web server. And now I'm going to try out my my endpoint. So I'm going to go print instructor lists. And when I execute this, it runs that function, which is, by the way, the name for this thing is a view function. So when you set up a route, here's the route. And then this function here is called a view function. And a view function produces a view of the URL. In this case, it's just HTML.